In the dark valleys, the elders warned about the last whisper game. The legend says that if you hear a whisper coming from the forest, calling your name, but no one's there, then the game has already begun. You must never answer the first whisper, not even the second. But if you hear the third, it means the caller has already found you.
Sarah, a young veterinarian new to town, heard the warning and laughed it off. One dark night, driving home on the lonely mountain road, she heard a faint, clear voice outside her window. Sarah.
She stopped the car, looked into the thick forest. Nothing. A shiver crawled up her spine, but she kept driving. Minutes later, she heard it again, closer this time, as if the speaker was sitting right in the back seat. Sarah. Her heart nearly exploded, but she remembered the warning. Don't respond.
She pressed harder on the gas. When she finally reached her front door and felt safe, she heard the whisper for the third time. It didn't come from behind her. It came from inside her, like it was pushing out of her own throat. Sarah. She opened the door and went inside. The next day, neighbors found her sitting in the middle of her living room, her eyes wide open, her throat ripped apart from the inside, as if something had torn its way out. And the last word recorded on her phone was, "I'm here."
My grandfather never spoke of the Valley of Ashes, except in a whisper, as if merely saying its name could bring misfortune. My childhood in the small town of Shadwell, at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains, was filled with stories about that valley, a place where hunters and travelers had vanished over the years. They used to say that anyone who heard the sound of the flute there would never return.
I was 20 years old, brimming with youthful doubt and curiosity, when I decided to see for myself after my grandfather's death. He had left me an old hand-drawn map, marked with strange symbols and coordinates of terrain I never thought existed. I packed my bag, took my camera, and set off into the woods one sunny afternoon, convinced I would prove it all nonsense.
The silence was the first thing I noticed. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, not even the rustle of leaves. It was a heavy, unnatural quiet. After 2 hours of walking, following the map, I found myself at the edge of a steep cliff. Below stretched a narrow, shaded valley, even in broad daylight. This was the Valley of Ashes. I descended cautiously. The ground was covered with a layer of fine white ash, as though a great fire had once raged there. Yet there were no charred tree trunks, no signs of burning, only that white dust clinging to everything. Then I heard it. It wasn't an ordinary flute. The melody was sorrowful, broken, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was hauntingly beautiful, drawing me deeper into the valley. My heart pounded, and I recalled my grandfather's warnings, but my curiosity was stronger. I followed the sound among the twisted trees until I reached a small cave. At its entrance, I saw something that froze my blood. A circle of small figurines made of clay and ash, lined up in perfect formation. They resembled human forms, but their faces were distorted, their bodies intertwined. In front of them lay a real flute, carved from dark bone. I raised my camera to capture the scene, but the screen filled with static and fog, though the air was perfectly clear. I tried to back away, but the flute's melody returned, louder, more insistent, wrapping itself around me.
From between the trees, shadows began to move. They were not people, nor animals. They were tall, thin, shifting masses of darkness that swayed like smoke in the wind. They had no faces, yet I knew they were watching me. I ran. I sprinted like a madman, never daring to look back, while the flute's tune chased me, growing angrier with every step. Cold touches grazed my back, and whispers I couldn't understand filled my ears. I never once turned around. When I finally reached the edge of the valley and stood once more beneath the sunlight, I stopped to catch my breath. When I glanced behind me, there was nothing but the dense forest and familiar silence. It was as if it had all been a nightmare. But when I got home, I found something in my pocket. A small flute carved from dark bone. And since that day, on quiet nights when the wind howls, I sometimes hear a distant flute echoing from the forest.
The hunters in the Holler Creek area were never afraid of bears or wolves. What they truly feared were the mudmen. They said these creatures formed from the mud of streams and riverbanks, taking on the vague shape of men, but with no clear faces. They moved in silence, breathing with a sound like bubbling water.
Jacob and his 10-year-old son Leo went on a hunting trip deep into the wilderness. As they crossed the stream, Leo slipped and fell in. When he stood up, his face was pale with terror. "Dad, something under the water grabbed my foot," he whispered. Jacob laughed, thinking it was just a tree root, but then he noticed something strange. Leo's shoe was spotless, as if some cold hand had wiped the mud away. That night, they began hearing heavy footsteps circling their camp. They weren't the steps of an animal, but the dragging, squelching steps of something massive moving through the mire. When Jacob shone his lantern, he saw fresh, muddy footprints all around the camp, but no one in sight.
At midnight, Leo woke to a whisper outside the tent. Peeking through the flap, he saw 3 figures standing at the edge of the woods. They weren't men, but dark, shifting masses of mud, shapes like human bodies. In the moonlight, he saw they had no eyes, only hollow pits in their faces. One of them whispered, its voice like bubbles rising from water, "We have taken his image. Now we want the body." Terrified, Jacob and Leo fled into the darkness, abandoning everything behind. When they returned the next morning with a group of men, the camp was still intact, but everything was coated in a thin layer of fresh mud. On the camp table, they found 3 small clay figures, one of Jacob, one of Leo, and a third figure of someone they didn't recognize. Neither father nor son ever went back to that forest. But on stormy nights, when the rain pours down in Holler Creek, the locals say they can still hear the heavy, muddy footsteps approaching their homes and the watery whispers asking for a new image to complete the collection.
In the deep mountain regions, the elders warn of creatures that only appear in the dawn fog. They do not feed on flesh or drink blood. They steal memories and voices. They don't kill you. They erase who you are. Aaron and Maya, newly married, decided to spend their honeymoon in an old family cabin in the woods. On the second morning, they woke to the sound of knocking on the door. When Aaron opened it, he froze. Standing outside was a man and a woman who looked exactly like them. Same clothes, same faces, even the same voices.
The man who looked like Aaron said calmly, "We've taken your cabin. Thank you for the hospitality." Aaron slammed the door shut in terror. Peeking out the window, he saw the duplicates walking casually around the cabin, chatting quietly, as if they had lived there for years. When Aaron and Maya tried to escape through the back door, they found the copy of Maya standing there, smiling with an unnaturally wide grin.
She whispered, "Don't worry. We'll live your lives better than you ever could." The couple was trapped. Their phones had no signal, and the car wouldn't start. From every window, they could see their copies living their lives, cooking, sitting on the porch, laughing. But as the hours passed, Aaron and Maya began to feel their memories slipping away. First, they forgot each other's names, then their wedding, then who they were at all. That evening, headlights cut through the fog. Maya's parents had arrived to check in on them. The false Maya ran joyfully into her mother's arms, while the false Aaron stood by, smiling confidently. The real Aaron realized with horror that he and Maya were being erased, and soon no one would even remember they had ever existed. In desperation, he grabbed a pen and paper and scrawled a note.
My name is Aaron. This is my wife, Maya. We are trapped in the cabin. Those two are not us. He slipped the paper through a crack in the roof. The next morning, as Maya's parents prepared to leave with their daughter, her mother noticed the paper stuck to the side of the car. She read it, her hands trembling, then glanced back at the cabin. For a brief second, her eyes met the real Maya's, staring desperately through the window. But then the mother turned away, whispered something to her husband, and climbed into the car. The engine started, the car drove off, leaving the real Aaron and Maya imprisoned forever with the things that had stolen their lives.
If you have a legendary story you would like to tell us, send it in the comments.